Hey guys, Mountsphere here, how y'all doing? Welcome back to Seduce Me to the Demon War. And we have Sam right here, right where we left off. I sat on the bed and let out a sigh, feeling the worry of the entire situation sink and fade out of my mind. I wasn't alone, at least anymore, and Sam was willing to fight for me to return home. It was unexpected, but it was amazing to have Sam here. Sam looked around the room, taking in the space.
Fancy room?
Yeah, apparently it's an open ambassador room. They let me sleep here when I came.
That was how long ago?
Like a day? Sam laughed and stuffed his hands into his pocket. What was so funny?
Oh, fuck. I forgot the time difference between this world and the human world.
Wait, time difference?
Yeah, time goes slower here and stuff. So, while you've been here a day, you've only been gone from the human world for 4 or 5 hours.
Oh, wow. Wait, huh? I was only gone for 4 or 5 hours? How was that possible? Then again, I was in another plane, so it was somewhat understandable. My brain just couldn't wrap around it. So I held my head, staring at the floor in shock. Sam laughed again and walked over to me, sitting by my side, before he wrapped an arm around my shoulder in comfort.
At least we found you. If it weren't for Damien and Twyla, it would have taken us longer.
I nodded, relieved regardless of how I was found. While I couldn't get back, there was a beacon of hope now, which replaced my previous worry and concern. I leaned my head onto Sam's shoulder, feeling exhausted. Exhaustion hit me like a wave, but I didn't want to sleep just yet. I was with Sam, so I wished to stay up just a bit longer and be awake with him. Sam?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to be awake a while longer. I looked up at him as he turned his head to look down at me, patiently waiting for me to ask whatever he assumed I was going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna save. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna give it to you guys. Help me stay awake. If I wanted to stay awake longer, then Sam needed to help me do that. Sam looked down at me, turned our bodies gently to face one another.
What do you want me to do?
Anything. I didn't want our reunion to end for the day with us going to bed. A kiss, a hug, a conversation, anything was acceptable as long as I got to be awake that much longer. Sam gently lifted my chin and lowered his head to kiss me, allowing me the choice to take his lips with wine. By stopping a mere centimeter away, I took it and melted into the kiss, wrapping my arms around him. My head and heart became full of Sam, feeling his heartbeat against my chest, tasting his lips against my own. Memories flooded back of us holding one another, and I began to mentally thank God for letting us be together again. Sam wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me close but not taking us any further. The kiss was slow, intimate, and romantic in every form. That was yet another thing I loved about Sam. He knew when to take things slow with me, and knew when not to get deeper than that. He respected me, loved me, and wanted to protect me with his entire being. I was blessed to have him as mine, and mine alone. As we pulled away, alas, Sam let a smug grin paint his face.
Well, I guess one good thing came out of this. I get to kick my old man's ass.
No, he's been wanting to do that. I knew Sam hated his father, but was it really a good thing? In retrospect, yes, morale, it was questionable. You really hate him, don't you? The smile on Sam's face slowly diminished to an angry expression, his eyes full of rage, but his mouth pressed into a fine line.
Yeah, I do.
Sam slowly stood back up and walked towards the fireplace, staring into it with his hands clenched into fists at his sides.
That bastard made me and my brothers miserable for years. We finally escaped, and then he grows the balls to try to steal the woman I love away from me.
Sam.
That bastard kills for fun. He burns kingdoms to the ground for not submitting to him, and murders hundreds just because he can. He has a fucking harem of people and replaces every one of them with prisoners of war by the handful. If he had gotten his hands on you, if he even touched you, I would've...
His fist tightened at his sides. I stared wide-eyed as blood, little by little, began to drip through the cervix of his fingers. I stood and rushed over, laying myself across his back and pressing my forehead into the back of his neck. Sam, it's okay.
Is it?
I looked up at Sam, turned around to face me. He didn't touch me, as his hands were still wounded from his tight fist, but his expression dimmed a bit to a look of sadness.
I would have never forgiven myself if you fell into his hands.
I stared deep into Sam's gaze, seeing the fear behind them. I was scared as well, but thankful to be saved by Serial and Diana. Someone above was watching over me carefully, and I thank God for that. I wrapped my arms around Sam's neck and leaned my head to his, pressing my forehead to his own. I'm safe now. Diana and Sarah saved me from that.
Thank God for that.
Sam wrapped his arms around me, fist still closed, pulled me to him tightly. I could see him biting his lip, almost piercing the skin, but maintaining some form of control. I frowned, but allowed silence to pass between us. We'll defeat the Demon Lord and go home soon. Sam nodded against my forehead. Remaining quiet, we had to let this pass. We had to move on and mentally prepare ourselves for a war. Sam would get his anger quelled, and we could be able to return home at last. We had to. Sam and I eventually pulled away from each other, locking our gaze lovingly.
Come on, we can't stay up all night.
I know. Sam lifted his hand, which was now free of wound and blood, and guided me to bed, crawling in after. I settled in between the sheets. Sam and I embraced lovingly and let the darkness of the night take over, bringing us to a quiet slumber. The dark of sleep was usually a friend of mine, only showing me nightmares on the rarest of occasions. The nightmare of my dying sent shivers. I don't really know if that made sense. The nightmare of my dying. I think it would make sense if it was said the nightmare of me dying, but, The nightmare of my dying sent shivers down my body as I recalled it, but I knew that it was only a dream. Would I have one like that again? I hope not. Would I have no choice in the matter if another came? That was another story. I opened my eyes to find myself in the mouth of a cave that descended beneath the earth. Behind and above me was a bright light where I could see my friends and family. However, as I looked down into the darkness, I caught the sight of Sam walking away further into the cave. Sam? He didn't answer. Sam continued forward, losing himself in the dark. I instantly began to follow, forgetting about the light for a moment, before stopping and looking back. My family had a look of despair, while my friends held each other, watching me with heartbroken faces. Was this some sort of message? Was I following Sam into a place my friends and family could not be in? Was this my future? I became torn. What was I going to do?
You are not worthy.
All of a sudden, the darkness became full of fire, and the bare outline of Sam's flashed before burning away in the light of flames. He couldn't even let out a scream of pain, as he was instantly burnt to ashes. Sam!
Run! Run!
Diana's voice echoed through the air. but I was frozen in place, watching the flames rush at me to take me as well. If I ran back, my heart would be sacred forever with the memory of flames taking my love away. If I stayed, I would die with Sam. I stood in the middle, unsure of what to do. As the flames took me, I woke up in a hot sweat. Yeah! Gripping the covers, I sat up staring at the far walls before looking around. My heart was beating wildly as the sweat ran down my cheek and the sides of my head. Another nightmare. This time, however, Sam woke up with me.
Whoa! Hey, what's wrong?
I looked to Sam, seeing him not burnt to or as ashes, but perfectly okay. I turned towards him and wrapped my arms around him tightly. Now desperate not to let him go, Sam, despite being surprised, wrapped his arms around me and held me close. 2 nightmares, both leaving me and Sam engulfed in flames. I died in the first, he died in the second. What was I going to believe anymore? Sam rubbed my back and gently implanted a kiss on my shoulder.
Hey, it's okay, alright? It was a stupid nightmare.
But you died.
You know I can handle anything that comes my way.
Could he really? He was strong, and he was fast, but was he powerful enough to withstand whatever he had let loose, those flames to swallow him whole? You are not worthy. What did the voice mean? How was Sam not worthy? What was he not worthy of? There was a million questions running through my mind, and none of them could be answered, at least not at the moment. I simply rested my head on Sam's chest and let him pull us back down to the bed to sleep.
Whatever happens, I'll always be here. Alright?
I nodded and closed my eyes, praying that I would not see the nightmare again. As fate was kind once more, I slept peacefully. The remainder of the night. I slowly woke from my sleep, feeling the ache of the morning consume and rush through my body relentlessly, in an attempt to keep me contained in bed. I didn't mind. I was pressed against a warm chest, one whose arms I adored to be in it. The nightmare plagued my thoughts, but my heart fluttered in reality, knowing that what I was feeling in the physical world was what I was supposed to care about. I looked up at Sam's sleeping face, giggling at the sight of his messy bed hair. Sam slowly woke from the sound of my laughter, blinking the sleep away to stare down at me.
Morning.
Morning. I smiled and kissed Sam on the lips to help rouse him, only to end up being pulled into a tight and loving embrace with my head buried in his shoulders.
Did you sleep okay?
The second time, yeah. Sam nodded in understanding against my shoulders. As I wrapped my arms around him, I felt so warm and safe within the confines of his embrace that the thoughts of the nightmare I had vanished from my mind. It would come back, but it was gone for now. Choices again. Oh, man. Should I nuzzle? Or should I kiss him? That's always the choice. It's like, what should I do? Nuzzle into his shoulder or kiss him again? Oh, man. Decisions are so hard. Oh, man. I'll just kiss him again. I pulled back a bit and kissed Sam once again, smiling happily and running my fingers along his back. Sam gently squeezed me and kissed me back, melting into the embrace between us. Morning kisses with Sam felt wonderful, and I didn't want to get up or pull away. I simply desired to relish in the feeling I had for Sam, and let him completely take over my thoughts.
Hey.
Yeah.
Since we're in the demon world, Do you think that maybe...
I opened my eyes to look over his shoulder, trying to understand what he was insinuating. When it finally came to me, I held my breath in realization. The demon marriage.
You don't have to decide right now, but before we go back, maybe think about it?
I wasn't sure what to say. My mind danced across the idea of binding my soul to Sam, but at what cost? I'll think about it. Sam nodded in understanding, kissing my shoulder. I knew it was something Sam really wanted, but was it something I was willing to go through? Sam gently loosened his embrace and pulled away to look at me with a tired smile.
I don't want to get up yet.
I laughed, knowing this was how Sam operated in the morning. He was definitely not a morning person. So seeing him curl up to me and ask permission to stay in bed was still an endearing sight that reminded me of how much I loved him. My heart warmed as I smiled and kissed his forehead. Then we don't have to. We can sleep a little longer if we want. Sam smiled and closed his eyes, pulling me against his chest with a hearty chuckle.
Good. You can go eat later.
Our peace was broken, unfortunately, by the sound of knocking at our door. Sam and I let out a stimulus groan. Our plan was ruined.
Go away!
Sam, we brought breakfast.
We'll eat later!
Are you seriously going to argue with me?
Come on, it's like 9 a.m.
Now I was getting upset. I wanted to stay in bed, feel Sam's arms around me for a little while longer. What was so much to ask? Screw breakfast. We have 3 more hours until noon.
Oh my god, just get up already. We're burning daylight here.
God damn it. Sam and I whined. Now we irritated that our plans to sleep in became ultimately impossible. However, we both understood that today was a new day and we had to start preparing to take on the Demon Lord. I slowly rose and sat up in bed, yawning as Sam begrudgingly followed suit. All right, come in. The door opened and in poured the Incubi's brothers and their wives carrying a plate of food each. James and Iridessa held out their 2 extra plates for me and Sam.
Thanks, Dessa.
You're welcome, Sparky.
Sparky. Thank you, James.
Of course.
James and Iridessa moved away from us as we both looked down at our plates. On it were fruit, slices, bread, cheese, and some form of jerky. I didn't recognize. It was probably safe knowing that the others were eating it as well. Sam, however, lowered his plate to his lap and looked up at his brothers.
So, what's the plan?
Well, we should probably take the next couple of days to train properly. Since we're in Lilith Castle, we'll have access to training equipment.
Lilith's Castle? This place has a name? The boys and Irene's, Eric's wife, nodded in reply. Sam stuffed a stick of jerky in his mouth and began to chew on it as Damien began to explain.
The first succubus, Lilith, was exiled here after being cast out of Eden by the heavens. She became a demon and soon began to breed more incubi and succubi than the world could control.
Wait, Lilith? As in Lilith from the Bible?
Yes. During her time here, she established a kingdom with this very castle at its heart.
It's a pretty castle indeed. I've never had the pleasure of coming here. I'm not really a fan of it.
Sam swallowed the bite of jerky he had in his mouth and licking his lip, joining the conversation.
Alright, so we train until we can't anymore.
Obviously, we'll need breaks in between, but we can't afford to let a day go by without intense training. We only have a week after all.
Yeah. Word began to bubble back into my mind. Everyone was willing to step up and start training, but Eric was right. We only had a week to prepare for the Demon Lord. We would be strong enough in time.
You fear too soon, child.
Huh? I straightened up my back and looked around, hearing the voice from my dream echo through the air. Everyone else looked at me curiously, wondering why I spoke up.
What?
Did you say something?
I looked around at everyone, seeing their confused faces. Did they not hear the voice?
They cannot hear me, child.
I shook my head, rubbing it gently with a nervous laugh. Sorry, I thought I missed something. The confusion in everyone's faces dissipated as everyone got back to the topic at hand. One I couldn't remember to focus on. My thoughts went back to the voice, wondering how it was speaking to me and how it knew what I was thinking.
I am closer than you imagine.
What do you mean?
Be patient, child. The time for answers will come soon enough.
I grew more and more concerned and confused. What was the spirit talking about?
I am no mere spirit.
Then what are you?
That I cannot tell you yet. When the time comes, you will know.
This was mildly scary. A voice in my head was speaking to me, and I could only speak back in my thoughts without anyone knowing what was going on. I looked around to see everyone still speaking to each other, but I couldn't focus on what they were saying. All I could focus on was the voice in my head.
Answers will come when the time is right. For now, I will bid you farewell.
Wait!
Whoa, wait, what?
I didn't realize I spoke aloud until everyone looked to me again. I looked to Damien, wondering if he heard everything going on in my head, but he seemed just as confused, if not more so, than the others.
You alright?
I'd rather tell them. I sighed. They had to know what was going on. Well, I just heard this voice in my head.
Huh?
A voice in your head? But I didn't hear any other voice but yours.
Did it sound like anyone you know?
I shook my head, remembering the sound of it. It was deep and echoing, masking any relatable trace from it. For all I knew, it was some sort of illusionary creation of my own mind. Then again, if I created it, then Damien would have been able to hear it. I sighed and rubbed my head. It was some sort of deep voice telling me to be patient and not to be afraid. It wouldn't tell me its name. I became worried about everyone thinking that I was crazy. I knew I wasn't, but I definitely sounded like someone who wasn't mentally there. Sam, however, wrapped an arm around me and hugged me to his side.
Well, whoever that voice is, it's right. There's nothing to be afraid of.
I wouldn't be too sure about that just yet.
Everyone in the room turned their heads to see Diana and Sarah standing at the door. Diana stepped further into the room, and Sarah stood at attention, watching her.
You five have been gone during the 10 years of this war. You do not seriously believe that you will be ready for this in a mere week, do you?
Diana seemed firm and serious. I could understand why, but a part of me felt a bit angry that she shut down our pep talk. Sam glared at Diana.
And if we do?
Then it is a foolish mistake.
How so?
10 years of absence can be unkind to one's abilities.
To be fair, it has only been 2 years for us.
Regardless, when was the last time any of you actually fought in battle?
Silence consumed the room. She was right. However, we weren't willing to give up that easily. I stood and placed my plate on the bed behind me. Why does it matter? We're going to defeat the Demon Lord either way.
We will. But there is no reason to try and breed ideas of false hope that it will be easy. Too many lives have been lost in this war with the hope that they'll all survive. It's better to be realistic.
The tone of her voice echoed a heavy warning. No doubt she had been hundreds or thousands of deaths in the war firsthand, but now was not the time to doubt ourselves. Sam stood up as well, standing at my side in defiance.
Fuck that. If you're right, then hope's the only thing we got.
Sarah stepped up to Diana's side, giving Sam a blank stare in return for his mistress.
Hope can only take you so far. Do you truly believe it will help you defeat the Demon Lord?
I felt Sam take my hand and nod, affirming his words. I smiled and squeezed his hand, agreeing. Sarah and Diana stared at us. With Diana crossing her arms, something was on Diana's mind. As she stared at Sam, just from looking in her eyes, what was it?
Can you say that with confidence?
I can. Want me to?
Not to derail the topic, but this is a waste of time. We should be preparing for war, not bickering about if we can or not.
A moment of silence passed through the room, as Diana stared at Sam sternly. However, she was distracted, distanced from the conversation, as if she was stalling time to have her thoughts wander. What was keeping her real attention?
Well, I'm not going to argue about this. Believe what you wish.
Sam and I waited and watched as Diana lowered her arms to her sides with a sigh.
However, we do have something to discuss.
Diana ran a hand through her hair and looked around the room, pressing her lips into a fine line.
So, about all of you participating in the war, you all obviously need to train.
Everyone nodded in agreement to Diana's statement. While we weren't battle ready, we still needed to at least know how to defend ourselves. Diana, however, looked at me.
You, most of all.
Huh, me? I was suddenly confused. How come I was the odd one out? That had to be ready the most. The last thing I remembered about me training was that Diana was against the idea altogether. Diana sighed and rubbed her temples.
Apparently, there are guidelines to breaking this curse. Not only do we have to kill the Demon Lord, but you have to be nearby when it happens for the curse to even break.
That makes no sense. Where did you learn this?
Shadow. He spent the night trying to find alternative ways to break your curse. Unfortunately, we didn't find anything of the sort, but we found the guidelines to breaking it.
Well, it still makes no sense.
Even while it doesn't, it's still better to be safe than sorry. I don't want to kill him and then still have you stuck here because of an error.
I could only sigh and take it in. So I had to be there when the Demon Lord fell. Great. Diana waved her hand dismissively through the air, breaking my potential thoughts.
Anyway, we can't have you dying on the way there, and we can't monitor you when we're in battle. You should at least know how to defend yourself. That's why we've come up with a solution.
Huh? What solution?
Simple. The other rebel leaders and Sarah have agreed that if you'd like a trainer to enhance your abilities, you can train with one of them.
I stared, seeing Sarah step forward with a nod.
Each of the leaders is proficient in a different area of magic and battle strategy, good enough for self-defense. I can't speak for the others, but I can assure you that with Sarah's skill and training methods, you will be well prepared by the time the siege arrives.
Sarah nodded and bowed to me slightly. While I was flattered at the idea, did I really need a trainer? I knew Taekwondo, and I at least knew how to defend myself. Oh my god. Oh my god, I just said something so wrong, and I hate myself so much for it. Taekwondo! Oh man, I knew that word too, and it just went right out the window. I mean, it's Taekwondo. Taekwondo. and I at least knew how to defend myself, demon or not. Then again, we were in the demon world, where magic was the norm. Great. I like to train. What will the others teach me? Well, I'll train with him. Sarah seemed skilled enough to train me. He was Diana's right hand, after all, and he was the one who apparently stopped the Demon Lord from getting his hands on me. I at least had to give it a shot. Sarah nodded and looked to Diana, who crossed her arms.
Very well. You've made a good choice, I assure you.
With that, Diana turned on her heels and left the room.
Finish eating. Afterwards, you should start training.
Everyone in the room nodded their affirmation as Diana and Sarah left.
Well, it looks like we'll be busy for the next couple of days.
This'll be fun.
Man, training's gonna suck.
It'll be worth it, though.
Damien's right.
As we all finished eating, everyone left to either train or do things on their own. I left to start on my own work, determined to be prepared for what was to come. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I wouldn't let him. I chose to train with Sarah. He seemed to be very skilled, so I trusted him to train me to the best of his ability. I didn't want to be a silent observer in this war. I would pull my weight. Sarah brought me to the Grand Hall, which he had apparently claimed as his personal training ground, as Sergeant had to use the official grounds for the army. And I'm going to save right here. Personal training grounds.
When I train my lady, I bring her here. That way she is not seen by the army.
Why would her being seen by the army be an issue?
It's not a matter of it being an issue. We simply choose to train together alone.
I nodded. If Diana had her reasons, then that was enough for me. Sarah nodded in return before holding his hand out to the side.
Now, do you have a preferred weapon of choice? Choose wisely. You need to focus and master one weapon if you wish to benefit from this training. I won't allow you to change your mind later.
I stared at Sarah, unsure of what he would ask me. I stared at Sarah, unsure of why he would ask me that. However, I closed my eyes and thought to myself for a moment. There was a couple of weapons I could think of. I thought of a gun, but what if human guns were powerless here? After all, demons had magic on their side. If they were powerful enough, maybe even a speeding bullet could be blocked with ease. I sighed and thought of what melee weapons I could use. A sword, a spear, I already know Taekwondo. How about surprise me? Sarah stared in surprise. What? I was ambitious enough to try anything. Why not? He's probably knew more about weapons than I did. I didn't want the sword, I didn't want the spear, I wanted something surprising. Sarah then gave me a small smirk before allowing black and purple mist to envelop his hand. I found myself growing nervous. What if he gave me a small dagger or something really hard to learn? I began to regret electing for a surprise. Eventually, the mist materialized into a strange object, a large lavender triangular blade sticking out from what looked like a round gauntlet. As Sarah walked towards me, he formed a copy of the weapon in his other hand and handed both to me. The opening of each gauntlet facing towards me, I raised an eyebrow at him. Was he really expecting me to stick my hand into those?
What, afraid to try something new now?
I shook my head. I had asked for this and was confident enough to try them. I slid my hands into the gauntlet and felt my fingers brush against the inner handles, allowing me to grip the weapon in each hand with ease. I lifted the weapon from Sero's grip and observed them. They seemed very light, almost feather-like, but I could feel energy pulsating from them. What are these?
Gauntlet daggers. The human world has a similar version of these weapons called katars, if I'm not mistaken.
They seem pretty light.
They may be light, but they can be incredibly deadly if used properly. Imagine them as extensions of your arms.
I gulped. Would I be able to learn how to use these properly enough to defend myself? I wasn't sure. Sarah walked away from me before forming his spear and gripping it tightly, ready to begin our session.
Trust your instincts. I'll go slow so you can adjust yourself to the weapon. However, I won't remain slow for long.
I stared at Sarah, now fully settling into what I had signed up for. I was learning how to defend myself and possibly how to kill someone else. I felt a nervous shiver run up my spine before taking a breath and trying to relax my muscles. Sarah seemed to take my breath as my signal to prepare, as he took a step back and readied himself with a stance.
Are you ready?
I nodded. I had asked to be trained. If I wasn't ready then, I wouldn't ever be. And we're going to save. Sarah crouched down, gripping his spear before lunging for me, ready to skewer me on its blade. I focused on the spear and swiped one of the guitars I held at it, making both collide with a clash before forcing the spear to angle away from its target. I was shocked at his strength, as I only managed to push his weapon away with adrenaline, helping my own strength against him. I bent back, watching the blade swipe over my body through the air. As I quickly straightened up, I noticed how open his body was for an attack. He was serious. Well, so was I. I felt powerful as I readied to attack him. I lunged in and prepared to pierce him with my own attack. However, Sarah moved his spear to cross his body, blocking my attack and pushing me back. I growled at myself at not seeing the strength of his defense. As I landed, though, I saw a small smirk on Sarah's face. Was he proud of me, or was he mocking me? Either way, I used the momentum to lunge forward again, continuing our sparring match. We continued to train relentlessly through the day. Each break we had was small, but I understood why. I only had a week to learn how to fight after all. Time wasn't on our side when it came to me learning how to fight, or at least defend myself. As we finished a sparring session, I slowed to take another break. I let out a sigh. I was exhausted, but I knew I had to keep going. If the incubi were going to keep training, then I had to keep up as well. Sarah let out a small sigh and stretched, wiping some sweat from the side of his brow before looking to me.
Let's take a break for now.
I think we did pretty good there. Yeah, good idea. I collapsed onto the floor on my rear and slouched over my crossed legs, thankful to no longer be on my feet. I thought Taekwondo was hard, but fighting with a weapon was proving itself to be even harder. I felt a little envious for people who were able to master weaponry.
I have to admit, I'm impressed. For the first time holding a weapon, you did pretty well. My lady had to train for months to try and use her weapon properly.
Well, what does Diana use? I was curious about her. I knew she had magic, but did she really need a weapon? Of course, if energy ran out, then she would need some sort of protection. Sarah stared wide-eyed at me for a second before smiling softly.
She uses a saber, a curved sword. While regular straight swords are good for piercing your opponent, curved blades are made for slashing and cutting your opponent down. They're a little difficult to maneuver without in-depth training.
Sarah looked down at his hand, forming a saber with a black grip and deep purple blade. It looked like a masterwork blade, despite its forming out of his magic. As Sarah stared at it, his smile brightened a bit.
A saber is much more graceful in combat than a regular sword. Anyone can wield it, but it takes a true master of the blade to use a saber properly and make a fight look like an elegant dance.
I was in awe. I could see a soft shadow of adoration in his eyes as he spoke. Did he really adore his mistress that much? Sarah looked to me with a chuckle.
I don't just care for my lady.
That was obvious. The way he spoke about her spoke volumes of his affection for her. As Sarah's looked to me, a flash of realization washed over his eyes. What?
You're human, so you would understand.
Understand what?
Love.
I stared at him, knowing the meaning of the word, but not understanding what he meant by saying it. What about love?
Well,
For a moment, Sarah looked back to the saber in his hand before shaking his head.
Never mind. It's nothing.
I wanted to ask more, but a pair of footsteps echoed through the room from the door, causing me to turn around and see who it was. Dana, lightly glistening with a thin layer of sweat and wiping her brow, stepped into the room with a smile. I could hear Sarah breathe. I could hear Sarah's breath hitch softly as Dana walked in. She did a small hair toss, most likely to get some cool air behind her neck, before looking at her guard and my trainer.
How is training going?
Going fine, my lady. How are the airs?
They're strong, but not strong enough. At least not yet. It will take more time to get them up to par with where they need to be for the war. They've been in the human world for too long, and they've lost their sense of real battle.
In haste, Deanna looked to me and held up her hand towards me as if to ask for forgiveness.
No offense to you, of course.
It's alright. I understood. The human world was vastly different from the demon world, so the boys had become humanized and softened. Still, I was sure that they would train hard and become better than the demon lord.
Anyway, I was just taking a break and wanted to check in. Had to make sure you didn't kill our guest, Sarah.
I would never!
Diana's laughter filled the room as Sarah's face brightened to a hot pink tinge.
I'm merely joking. I trust you, Sarah. Besides, she can take care of herself.
Damn straight. Diana looked to me with a nod and a smile, as if she knew that I would be okay, at the least in Sarah's hand.
I'll leave you both be then. I'm sure that after we're finished training, your husband will want to replenish his energy, and it wouldn't do if you were still training here when he finishes.
With that, Diana turned and walked out of the room. Sarah and I kept our eyes on her before I looked over to the sudden love-struck guard. His eyes were glued to the door that Diana left from, almost unblinkingly. I'll let him stare a little bit longer. There was no harm in letting him be weird for a little while. As he stared at the door, I stretched my neck. Finally, Sarah stepped out of it and looked to me, blushing and wide-eyed.
Sorry. Where were we?
Training.
Training! Right. Let's go again.
In a complete reversal, Sarah's expression hardened to a serious stare at me. I nodded, knowing that the break we had was now over. And with this, guys, I'm going to leave this episode here, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. I will talk to you guys later. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked that video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, you can always subscribe. You can always drop me a line down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Talk to you guys later. Home. Diana grunt of pain next to me made me shoot my head towards her, and I watched her slowly push herself off of the ground and glare at the table.
The demon lord must have done something more than simply bring her here.
What could he have done?
The demon lord is incapable of doing anything of the sort. His lackey imps must have done something to her.
A spell?
A curse.
I looked to the rabbit woman, seeing her stare wide-eyed at me. The other demons stared at me as well, and suddenly I felt like I was on display. Was something wrong with me?
She will not leave the demon world alive. He must have placed some sort of curse on her to prevent her from leaving this plane. In order to leave, she'd have to die.
Ah,